Nasty, nasty work, Tiffany Hayes. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You are pushing for physical harm and violence on Caitlin Clark because she busted your you-know-what in a basketball game that you was doing a lot of trash talking into. This is nasty.
Hello, everyone. Hope you all are doing well. There is a legally and institutionally significant line that separates competitive hostility expressed within basketball from behavior that spills off the court into territory that professional leagues, their legal teams, and corporate partners classify as a completely different level of seriousness. On-court physicality, trash talk, and the mental warfare inside competitive basketball are all governed by established league rules, referee enforcement, and the CBA disciplinary structure. They are expected, regulated, and contained within a clear institutional framework. What happens when a verified professional athlete with a major public platform engages with content that includes explicit suggestions of off-court physical harm directed at a named individual falls under a totally different set of legal, institutional, and corporate responsibilities, creating a separate category of organizational obligation. The Indiana Fever situation has already spent weeks producing documented questions around front office and coaching staff accountability. Today, that accountability conversation shifts into a different subject, a different platform, and a different level of potential consequences, requiring the same strict analytical standard we've applied across every documented situation this season. Today, we are conducting a precise, evidence-based breakdown of the Tiffany Hayes social media situation, what was actually documented, what it means legally and institutionally, and what the WNBA's response signals about the league's consistency in discipline. We are not amplifying the details of the threats beyond what is necessary to establish the factual record. We are strictly examining the professional conduct of a verified athlete operating in a public-facing digital environment. The specific nature of the content she engaged with, along with the institutional responsibilities that engagement creates for the league office, the Golden State Valkyries organization, and the WNBA Players Association. We are also addressing the consistency issue directly, because the same week that brought documented league discipline against Stephanie White for officiating criticism is now the same week producing this situation, and the league's comparative response will ultimately define what its enforcement priorities communicate to every stakeholder watching. Let us establish the factual sequence.
I believe Tiffany Hayes went on social media and did this. So, there was people in the social media world, and look, there's weirdos out there, okay, that Caitlin Clark's had a stalker already. So these things are to be taken serious, regardless if you want to or not. We watched someone get arrested for stalking this woman, okay?
The on-court context comes first and essential to properly understanding what unfolded once things extended beyond the game itself. During the Indiana Fever's 90-82 win over the Golden State Valkyries, Tiffany Hayes was involved in a documented physical and psychological exchange with Clark that featured direct, in-your-face contact clearly aimed at disrupting Clark's competitive rhythm. Clark's response, a serious 33-foot attempt well beyond the standard three-point line that went down, followed by verbal engagement directed toward Hayes, became the type of moment that instantly lives in highlight reels and enters the permanent game record. Hayes' performance on the floor in the aftermath of that sequence began to drop off noticeably. Her shooting efficiency fell during that stretch. The Valkyries ultimately came up short by 8 points on the scoreboard. These remain strictly documented box score facts, not interpretive analysis or opinion. The social media activity that followed is where the broader institutional question actually begins.
And another person said, listen, I got some cousins. We don't need to speak about that. We'll ride at dawn upon request. Just let me know. So this person is saying, I got some cousins that'll do physical harm and commit to violence on Caitlin Clark that has nothing to do with on the court. You're talking about harming someone violently off the floor in their regular day-to-day lives. This is nasty, regardless if this person is serious or not. As a professional, you should not be entertaining this. You should not be laughing and kikiing and ha-haing and pushing for this, Tiffany Hayes. This is nasty work. Tiffany Hayes puts "that's real" with the crying face. It's not funny that you...
Listen to this. In the hours after the game, Tiffany Hayes started interacting with posts flooding her mentions, including messages throwing around the phrase "crash out," which in basketball culture basically means somebody losing emotional control so badly that it turns physical during a game involving Caitlin Clark. Man, once people noticed Hayes engaging with those posts, screenshots spread everywhere and the entire situation started exploding online. But hold up, the moment that pushed this into a way more serious territory came when one fan posted a message openly talking about bringing family members in to physically harm Clark away from the court. The post even suggested they could show up at dawn if needed, and girl, there was nothing vague or joking about what was being implied. This wasn't trash talk about hard fouls or aggressive defense during basketball competition. It was a direct statement describing people supposedly ready to carry out planned physical harm against a specific person in her private life. Off the court, Hayes' documented reaction to that exact message was replying in a way that described it as real. And you won't believe this, she paired that response with an emoji that appeared to show amusement.
This is nasty work. Tiffany Hayes puts "that's real" with the crying face. It's not funny that you are pushing for this. The WNBA needs to come out and suspend her ass right away. Okay, a fine isn't enough. She needs to be fined and suspended immediately. There's no way she should.
The institutional breakdown of that interaction needs to be crystal clear because this goes way beyond normal sports drama. What Hayes did in a publicly documented and archived exchange was give a positive response to content openly talking about coordinating off-court violence against a specific individual. She never reported the post to authorities or platform moderators. She never came out and condemned what was said. She never clarified that she viewed the message as inappropriate or unacceptable. Instead, she responded with wording and an emoji that many people interpreted as approval mixed with amusement. Man, when a verified professional athlete with a major platform reacts that way to content involving threats toward another player, that stops being just a basketball issue. It becomes a corporate image issue, a legal exposure issue, and most importantly, a serious personal safety issue. And hold up, Caitlin Clark is not just some random celebrity name being discussed online here. She already has a documented history involving stalking situations serious enough to require law enforcement involvement. That history changes the entire weight of publicly entertaining content about off-court harm against her, making it far more serious than a typical social media clash between athletes. When someone with Hayes' visibility appears to endorse messages describing coordinated violence toward a person with that kind of documented background, the impact does not happen in isolation. It spreads inside an online environment that can easily be seen by people who may already be unstable or motivated to act. And listen to this, the mass blocking spree Hayes reportedly engaged in afterward against accounts criticizing or documenting her interaction with the threatening content did not come across as accountable to many observers. It looked more like digital damage control from someone trying to escape the backlash without directly addressing the behavior that caused the controversy in the first place.
Ridiculous, okay? And now what do you have? Tiffany Hayes can't handle it. And what is Tiffany Hayes doing? Tiffany Hayes is now blocking people on social media because they're calling her out for her immaturity and her lack of professionalism and the stupidity.
Now, the Golden State Valkyries organization is staring at a situation they cannot simply ignore or delay addressing. They employ the player whose documented public behavior has now created an entirely different security atmosphere surrounding the upcoming matchup against the Indiana Fever. Because of that conduct, the security preparation for the next Fever Valkyries game has already been materially changed behind the scenes. And listen to this, this is no longer just about bad headlines or online backlash hurting the team's image. This has become a real operational issue and a legitimate legal concern that the Valkyrie security personnel, legal advisors, and front office executives are obligated to deal with no matter what punishment or response ultimately comes from the league. Man, the organization's public handling of its own players' documented actions is now an institutional test in itself, and everybody is watching closely. The league office will analyze it carefully, sponsors will evaluate it seriously, and the media covering this controversy will absolutely treat the franchise's response as part of the bigger story.
At WNBPA, at Kathy Engelberg, at WNBA Commish, at WNBA. Hope you do something about Tiffany Hayes inciting hate with fans on social media and inciting violence. violence, you guys.
Disgusting. Just look at the situation. People online were directly tagging the WNBPA, Kathy Engelbert, and the WNBA itself, demanding action against Tiffany Hayes over what many viewed as encouraging hate and even fueling violent rhetoric on social media. And hold up, once the conversation reached the point where fans were openly talking about violence, the entire issue crossed into territory the league office simply cannot ignore anymore. The consistency question hanging over the WNBA right now is massive, and honestly, it deserves to be discussed with complete honesty and precision. During this same 7-day stretch, the league moved quickly to fine Stephanie White over public comments criticizing officiating. That punishment was handled fast, confirmed publicly, and presented as a standard enforcement of the league's conduct policies for coaches. The message from the league at that moment was unmistakable. Criticizing officiating publicly could immediately lead to financial penalties for team personnel. But now, the WNBA is dealing with a documented case where a verified player publicly interacted with content describing off-court violence against another named player in a way many interpreted as supportive. The two situations are obviously not identical in nature or severity. One situation centers around criticism of referees. The other involves conduct carrying direct implications tied to personal safety concerns. And man, that difference actually makes the consistency issue even more important instead of less important. If league officials react faster and more publicly to officiating complaints than to a player appearing to endorse content involving physical harm toward another named player, the message that sends about institutional priorities becomes extremely difficult to defend long-term for a league trying to maintain credibility with sponsors, broadcasters, and gambling partners who expect professional standards. The WNBA Players Association also has a separate responsibility in this entire situation that exists independently from whatever the league office decides to do. The union exists to protect both the professional careers and personal well-being of every player in the league. Caitlin Clark is part of that membership. Tiffany Hayes is also part of that membership. So listen to this: how the association responds to documented conduct from one player that creates possible personal safety concerns for another player will ultimately reveal what its commitment to protecting players truly looks like when tested in a real-world situation. What the league is saying publicly and what this whole situation is actually revealing behind the scenes are two completely different conversations. And man, people can see right through it. The reality is pretty simple if you break it down analytically. The league office has one clear path forward here. Listen to this: a formal, documented response that directly matches the nature of the conduct needs to be issued publicly, set the standard loud and clear, and happen before these two franchises meet again on the schedule. Because hold up, if the response is too soft, does that really align with the league's responsibility to player safety, sponsor trust, and the credibility of the entire organization? What that punishment or response ultimately looks like is completely within the league's disciplinary power, but the fact that some kind of response is necessary at this point honestly shouldn't even be up for debate anymore. For Hayes personally, the road ahead is just as obvious, although it requires a level of accountability that, based on everything we've seen after the incident, she still hasn't fully shown. A real public acknowledgement, not vague wording, not excuses, specifically admitting the content was inappropriate, admitting her reaction was wrong, and showing she understands why the backlash exploded the way it did, without hiding behind misunderstandings or continuing to block critics, is the bare minimum if professionalism actually matters here. That alone doesn't erase the league's responsibility to respond officially, but it would at least be the first real step toward the personal accountability this situation now demands. And girl, the bigger structural issue this whole controversy exposes deserves way more attention than people are giving it. The WNBA is moving through a massive era of commercial growth right now. New teams, massive media deals, expanding sponsorships, growing gambling partnerships, all of it depends on the league being viewed as a serious, professionally operated business at the highest level. But listen carefully, the infrastructure behind that image, media preparation, social media standards, and behavioral policies that are enforced consistently across the board has to grow at the same speed as the business itself. The disconnect between the league's massive commercial ambitions and the systems designed to support player conduct is exactly what allows situations like this to spiral the way they have. And if the league truly wants this explosive growth to last long term, closing that gap is not optional anymore. Thanks for watching, and make sure you subscribe to the channel because this conversation is far from over.